Guy Code with Rena Osware.
Now, welcome to another episode of The Guy Code with me, Rena Osware. I hope you're staying safe and keeping clean during this coronavirus period, and I will definitely keep the content coming and keep the discussions going. Now, on this episode, we're going to be talking about the Kenyan Guy Code rules, or the Bro Code rules. These are just a few unwritten rules that Kenyan men live by, which affects how they interact with their fellow men. And I have just listed 10 of them. My Kenyan audience will definitely agree to most of them. And for those international audience who haven't interacted with a Kenyan man before, these are just a few things you should know in case you get to, interact with one during your lifetime. So let's just get into it. Number one is that Kenyan men measure everything. We measure everything. So when a Kenyan man meets another Kenyan man, the first things that happens, most of it is actually subconsciously, is that we look for any sign of success. And this is especially in material things. Kenyan being a third world country, material possessions is very highly sought after. So we look for signs of success, especially in material things, which is definitely the number one is which kind of car you drive. If he has car keys, which kind of car does he drive? The most recommended car, or the car that most high profile Kenyan men drive is Toyota Land Cruiser, a V8 engine. So most people in Kenya, we call it the V8. So if he has that V8, it means that it's a sign of high status. It's a sign of wealth and success. So this is the kind of things that when a Kenyan man meets another Kenyan man, maybe strangers or anything, they look for signs of success, which is definitely shows in material things. Number one being the car that he drive. Number two could be probably their clothes, or mostly their electronic accessories, not even the clothes. The electronic accessories, the iPhones, any Apple product if he has. There's Apple phones is definitely a sign of success in Kenya. The second one being very new, state-of-the-art Samsung phones. They're also a show of high status in Kenya. So definitely car keys, one, the kind of car you drive, the kind of phone you have, the kind of gadget you use, whatever gadget, phone, laptop, iPad, whatever he has, technology. And probably the next one would be the clothes. Probably, the kind of clothes they have, the kind of shoes he's wearing. So these are the kind of things that men look for when meeting to another Kenyan man that he hasn't met before, to see what kind of person am I meeting with, and how will I interact with him, because the level of success will definitely affect how a Kenyan man interacts with his fellow Kenyan man, definitely. So that's number one. Men measure everything. Kenyan men measure everything. Number two, this is also is actually a unique one to Kenyan men, is that if you hear a Kenyan man address another Kenyan man as mkubwa, mheshimiwa, or chairman. So for those who don't know Swahili, mkubwa means big guy. Mheshimiwa is honorable, which is actually used to politicians, honorable so-and-so. So mheshimiwa is actually a title used by political figures. So if he addresses another Kenyan man as mkubwa, mheshimiwa, or chairman, then just know one thing is that they are not close. Okay? Because close friends, or say close Kenyan men, when they are friends, they don't address each other in that way. In fact, most of them don't even address each other. We don't address each other by our names. If they meet, if you see two very good friends meeting, they will just start talking, and you don't hear him saying it, hi, like Andrew, hi John. No, they just start talking like that. Hey, the conversation just flows. When you hear a Kenyan man address another one as Mkubwa Mheshimiwa, just know they are not close, and they do that. They address the fellow man that way to show respect. And since, of course, Kenya being I'll say, is a conservative country, we don't really look for confrontation. We avoid confrontation at all costs. So just to show respect, we use those terms so that the person can feel respected, and so that we don't have a confrontation. So we are a very conservative country, and actually a culture. So, but close friends, definitely they'll just come and they just start talking. So you may actually not know the name of the other person. If you're with a Kenyan guy and he meets his very close friends, they will have a whole discussion and you won't know who the friend's name is, and it's very normal. So that's how it is. That's number 2. Number 3 is more into the body language part of it, is the eye contact. Now, when Kenyan men are talking, or especially, of course, it's face to face, we maintain eye contact, especially when you're having very light conversations. Maybe talking about sports, talking about maybe hanging out in the club or something like that, just drinking, having a nice time, or talking about women. But I've noticed in my experience that Kenyan men, we usually break eye contact when talking about very serious topics such as money or power. Okay, when it just happens automatically when you hear a Kenyan, when you see two men trying to, probably especially in a trading situation where they're trying to negotiate, they're usually not eye contact, because when talking about such issues and having eye contact, it can seem confrontational, and this is very subconscious. So when talking about such things, we usually break eye contact so that also not to seem confrontational, because in this culture we really avoid confrontations. We don't like, we're not the kind of people to be all up in people's face. That's not how we are. So especially talk about discussing, trying to negotiate, we might not really have eye contact, but if we do, we actually smile, or just to show that it's a light moment, to try to remove any tension in this kind of conversation. Or power, in that probably having political discussions, which are very often among Kenyan men, is that we won't have eye contact, because especially these topics of politics can be very touchy, and people can get very emotional. It can get very emotional to many people. So to avoid confrontation, we might actually break eye contact not to build tension. So that's just my own observation from body language by that Kenyan men have. So a couple of people can disagree or agree. So for my Kenyan brothers, you can put in your input on this particular point. Number 4 is hypermasculinity is common. And this is what most feminists would call toxic masculinity. Kenya being, of course, an African country, and Africa being still having very let's say it's a patriarchal society even right now. Growing up, most of us have grown up or have been raised by fathers who are very patriarchal, very dictatorial in their own, in leading the household. So we took up from that, and that's how most Kenyan men right now can be very traditional in the roles of men and women, and the expectations of roles of men and women, and that's just how it is in the society. So hypermasculinity can be very common, and the metrosexual males are few and far between, to be honest, and they usually they stay in the cities, especially probably if they are raised in households that are very I can say urban maybe they were taken to schools or had this education system that it was very Western, and they were allowed to have these different ideologies that are not very African. So that could actually lead them to be metrosexual, but these metrosexual men are very few and far between. Yeah. So just to make an example of hypermasculinity in Kenyan men, as far as taking care of ourselves, the a majority of men have as far as grooming is a lotion, one Vaseline lotion, whatever, a deodorant, and a cologne. Those three things. Unlike probably in the West, where you can have like all these face scrubs and all these different lotions for different part of their bodies, we can actually just have those three of those, and that can be a very successful man who can afford probably the face scrubs and the the anti-aging creams and all that. We usually don't have that, and having all of that can be seen as very unmasculine, and it doesn't. In a hyper-masculine society such as Kenyan, it really raises eyebrows if you have all that and claim to be still want to affirm your masculinity. So just to know that hyper-masculinity is very common, and you should expect that, especially of course dealing with Kenyan men. Number 5 is Kenyan men hang out or get to bond when doing physical activities. So especially in the weekends, or probably the evenings or every other evening, you find Kenyan men mostly just hanging out in the clubs or in the bars. Usually they get to bond over drinking. That is how it is. Even that's what our most traditional tribes in Kenya, the elders used to bond that way, especially late in the evening. They come together and they bond over the traditional brews. So right now we still continue with that. Is that we usually bond over drinking and doing and watching physical activities, like of course sports and and even competitions like this has been races, like they're actually races, car races in Nairobi. They're usually most male participants. So such competitive activities is what Kenyan men usually bond over and hang out when it's just the boys. That's usually the boys' night out activities for us. Watching sports, drinking, racing cars, stuff like that. You will I've never heard of men saying, okay, let's go just chill out and watch a movie or watch a play. That's not a thing that Kenyan men do, because it's very passive and doesn't involve physical activity that we can join in and get to engage. Number 6, I would say, is Kenyan men their view on relationships. Now this is a very tricky one and very funny one, because a Kenyan man can smash your girl, but he will never steal your woman. Never. That doesn't happen. He can sleep with her but not steal her. Why? Because this Kenyan society is very patriarchal, and women are seen as property, and they're objectified a lot of the times. So a Kenyan man will treat women as property, including your girl, but very few Kenyan men will say, I want your girl because I don't see you treating her right and I can treat her better. That I've never seen that happen. I probably have had it once. It happened where someone stole his best friend's woman and actually married her, but it hardly happens. Like, usually a lot of objectification, and since women are seen as property, he will just probably enjoy her for the night or two and give her back. But you don't expect a Kenyan man to actually steal your girlfriend and start a whole relationship with her. No, they will have a moment, it will happen, and it will pass. And most Kenyan men can actually, brush it off, because also if you objectify women, you're like, what, I can still get another one. This guy is cool. It happens. If it were me, I would probably do the same with his girl. If there's just one thing led to another. Because that's a funny, very interesting thing to know, is that Kenyan man will not steal your girl, but he will definitely smash a girl if the opportunity just happens to arise. Just keeping it honest. Number 7 is, I'll highlight a few things Kenyan men never say. Okay, it's a few things Kenyan men never say. 1, Kenyan men never say I love you, ever. We're raised in a society that fathers never actually say affectionate things, but they show it through providing. So a Kenyan man will actually show, probably I can say, quote unquote, his love for his homies by providing prior, saying, you guys, let's go out, I'll be buying today. That's how they show it. They show it by providing, because that's what they've been raised to do. That's what we've been raised to do. Another thing that we Kenyan men never say is good night. When it's late in the evening, we are meeting tomorrow, we just say, yo, kesho. Kesho means tomorrow. It's like, let's meet tomorrow. Say, see you later. Or say, yeah, that's what Western communities will say, see you later. We usually say, see you later. We never say good night. That thing Kenyan men hardly ever say is, I'm sorry. Kenyan men hardly say I'm sorry, because it's just we have a culture of it's never that serious. That's a mindset that many Kenyans, not even the men, most Kenyans have, that it's never that serious until it's too serious. So if you're for someone who is easily offended, it's usually frowned upon. Usually most Kenyans, you're expected just to rub it off, brush it off, and just move on. So the only time I could say Kenyans will actually, or a Kenyan man particularly, we Kenyan men will actually say I'm sorry, is when it's someone we don't know, and if it's in a particular setting, if it's like in a formal setting, in an institution, in a company, in that where we're expected to have we have to expected to display or show some sort of decorum. We'll actually say I'm sorry, because of the time and the place dictates that we show some courtesy and decorum. So yeah, that's the only time you will hear us say I'm sorry. Number 8, I would say masculine personalities in Kenya is actually masculine traits in Kenya is actually when you're laid back, letting loose, and never being faced. A person who is laid back, who's just chilled out and is hardly faced by anything, never takes anything too seriously, usually seen as very masculine. Because why? Because most of our fathers, who are patriarchs, were usually like that. They were never really faced by anything. They never really showed emotion. Whatever happened, they just stayed the same. So that's actually the main thing that is seen as very masculine. So the opposite of this description of a masculine trait actually fall through 3 different categories. So if you find a man who is uptight or is very stuck up, he's called a mtiaji. So mtiaji is just, when you hear Kenyan say that person is a mtiaji, or in Kiswahili say huyu mtu ni mtiaji, that person is a mtiaji, it means that person is very stuck up and uptight. When you're very uptight, a person who is very uptight, who really don't want to let loose, don't want to just chill out and say, you guys take it easy. If he's always uptight, he's seen as a mtiaji. So that's really, it's frowned upon. He said, yo, you guys, you should let loose. When you're called a mtiaji, it means you guys, you should just chill out and let loose. It's never that serious, as I mentioned before. Another you can say another derogatory term that can be used by a Kenyan man to describe someone who is not masculine is also called umama. Umama means mama is the same as mother. So you're showing woman like tendencies. This is someone who is actually just very is faced by these small things. You get these who is just when you see a man who is just really uptight about the small petty things, who is it says a man who is very petty. He said ye ni mama, akona umama. He's showing womanly tendencies, very uptight about very petty things. The third one is kimbelembele. Now if you hear a Kenyan man's calling another person akona kimbelembele, means he's someone who is always trying to intrude, interrupt, and contribute in everything unnecessarily. you're just trying to get ahead unnecessarily, which actually is the direct definition of kimbelembele means. Mbele means forward. So kimbelembele means you're always ahead, trying to get ahead unnecessarily. You're trying to, like what you will describe as a teacher's pet. You're trying to show that you're over effective and trying to make other people look bad by you trying to be over effective. So that's how it is. The masculine traits in Kenya is a man who is laid back, lets loose, and is never phased. And the opposite of these is a man who has one, who is mtiaji, who is uptight and stuck up. Two, kimbelembele, who is always trying to show he is over effective and trying to make others look bad by trying to be over effective. And three, umama, in that he is very easily faced by the very petty things. Yeah. So number 9 is that a few things that we Kenyan men do not talk about. A few things that we Kenyan men do not talk about. One is that we don't judge each other over drinking or partying or just letting loose. Anyone who lets loose or has too much fun, we don't really judge that, because it's actually praised. Because in a society where it's hakuna matata, no worries. So the more you let loose, it's actually the better for you, because you're having fun. No one wants to be that person who is the buzzkill. So even if you're having too much fun, you don't want to be that person who is having the buzzkill, like, oh, you guys, you should chill out, we should do that, even though it could help sometimes, but we're usually hesitant in doing it. Secondly is that we don't really comment on clothes and physical appearance, whether very positive or very negative, you get. So we don't really compliment on physical looks, of course, and even on probably even clothes, or it's very particular, especially it also depending on the time and place and the situation. If it's a very formal meeting and it's a tuxedo event and the tuxedo looks really expensive, because as I said before, the first thing we notice is a measure of success. So if what they're wearing shows success, we will talk about it in the context that what he's wearing shows symbolizes high status. But just saying that, oh, he looks good in this or that, we never do that. So just to know, we don't comment on physical looks and clothes, and we don't judge people, because no one wants to be that buzzkill. Or I said in a point before, you don't want to show like you're uptight, mtiaji, if you understand it, because I just mentioned it, what mtiaji is. And number 10 is that I'll just highlight for you a couple of topics Kenyan men love to talk about. If you meet a Kenyan man and you just want to start off a quick conversation, a small chit chat, these are the 5 subjects that we love to talk about. Number 1 is where we are from, especially in as far as location, and of course this actually means getting to the Kenyan man discussing his tribe and his ethnicity, and we're very proud of where we're from. Most of us actually are very proud of where we're from, so we'll openly discuss where we're from, our heritage and our culture, and our practices, because that's our identity. Number 2 is sports. We love our sports, especially our football. And when I mean football, I don't mean like what Americans call football. I mean soccer, what Americans call soccer, as we call it football. So we love football, sports. We love to talk about politics, about power, because politics although it can be a very emotional subject, so be careful of how you talk about it. And number 4, women. Of course, we love to talk about women. And 5thly, we love to talk about money. And because money is a symbol of success, and every man wants to be successful, I think, in every part of the world. So these are just kind of the top 10 things that are in the Kenyan Guy Code book. It's unwritten, but it's just a couple of things I've highlighted. my Kenyan brothers can add on to a couple of them that I probably have missed out. For my international listeners, I hope I've given you some insight on how Kenyan men act and interact with each other. This has been this episode, and you can keep following me on the different social media handles on Twitter and Instagram. And until then, we shall talk soon. Bye.